Welcome to Polishing Marbles. I'm Audrey, and on today's podcast, I'm asking the question, what is your soul calling? Your mission? The thing you were brought to this planet at this time to do? And how do you know what it is? How do you know when you've completed it? I'm going to break down how we can identify these things both before and after our spiritual awakening, because we've often been given clues for a very long time. And I'll offer some detailed accounts of my own journey, including my recent mission completion with Gridwork around the divine masculine and what is coming next. Lastly, I channel Osho to get further guidance for you on how to pursue your own mission of service to Gaia, which is both thorough and encouraging. Thank you for joining me today for this deep dive, as I've rarely shared details from this particular mission with the public. I hope it serves to inform your own journey while offering some entertainment with my adventurous antidotes. Please remember, for all my storytelling and insights offered from a vibration of absolute love and service to humankind and Gaia, you are your own guru. Look to your heart for your own truth, as love will always illuminate your path. Hello. Welcome to this podcast on your soul mission. I'm really excited about this podcast. I'm excited about all of them, but this one I've been toiling on, not in a laborious sense, but in a sense of I really had to dig within myself to reflect on my mission completion, what other missions have come in before. What have I already completed in my awareness or before my awareness began in terms of prior to awakening, and how to really communicate that effectively for people who are at all different stages of their journey. Because if this was just a podcast geared toward people who are post Kundalini awakening, it would look very different than people who are at all different parts of their journey. And I'm here for all the parts as a mentor, a guide, a friend, to process with you through this modality of where are you at in your journey of your mission? What does that look like? How do I know I'm done? How do I know what my mission is? And all of those things. And so as I'm coming to some completion with multiple, as it turns out, as I dig deep, I'm with multiple missions that I've been called to during this real time of death and rebirth in my life. And it's so interesting how it works, because it is truly a big part of my journey is the death and rebirth, because of living on my Uranus line, which is my transformation line, with astrocartography, having lived here my whole life so far. And to be able to look back cyclically at my life to see how many times I have died and been reborn energetically in friendships, careers. We don't just die in our physical bodies, but we do it in a lot of other ways. And it doesn't mean that other people who aren't on their Uranus line or Pluto line or whatever aren't going through that kind of transformation. It's just more aggressive in this area. So it's kind of my area, I think, of my mastery, is to be in that extreme repeated initiation through death and rebirth. And I am really looking forward to sharing with you where I'm at on that, and give you tools to see where you're at on that too, no matter where you live in your astrology, astrocartography lines, because we're all in this fractalized aspect of continued expression. So for those of you who've ever sat and looked at something like a psychedelic animation, or you've been on plant medicine, you can see that everything continues to express and expand of itself in new ways. For this podcast, I want to talk about missions, how you know you're on one, how you know you're done with one. What if you don't know if you have one? What could it be? How do you find out? All that good stuff. And then at the end, I'm going to channel Osho for some more specific guidance. And so much has been coming in for me since coming back from Maui and integrating um, on more specific notes that I'm going to just kind of weave that in here. And some of this, I feel like I'm trying to simplify my life, not make it more complicated, which is what I have had a propensity to do in my life. So while I would love to like create a beautiful edited video montage of all of my grid work journeys into one, I'm not going to do that because that would take too much time. Instead, I'm going to provide some links to specific grid work journey reels I've already created that you can go and look at if you'd like to see those reviews of those grid work journeys. And in the future, I'm going to create more for that. But until then, if we want to get this podcast out in a timely manner with all the things I need to get done, I'm just going to give you some links. And if you want to see them, you'll see them. Okay. Um, so one thing is like the missions that we have in life, I personally am like splitting them up into like the pre-awakening and post-awakening missions. My daughter calls them the before times, and then she goes dramatically like this. Like there should be some like caw in the distance. The before times. So the before times missions I know that I've had, which are really like things you're called to do, things you know, like your soul feels expanded when you're doing them. You feel joyful, you're excited, you enjoy it, all of those things. Those are things that before we're aware of like a spiritual journey or a spiritual path in the way that maybe you are now, you can look back retrospectively, whichever word, both work, and be like, oh my God, that totally tracks because that led me to this and this and this. And okay, so that makes sense, you know? And so for me, those like pre before time missions were very clearly around like I wrote them out. The callings were number one, first and foremost, my whole life was mental health. And in part, I think that that mental health call that I had since third grade was upon watching the movie Sybil with Sally Field, was very much a curiosity of the human experience and how we express that when our experiences are difficult. Like, how does that manifest? When we experience something dark and gruesome and horrible, that distorts our experience as a human into being challenging and so many things come out of that that are painful. And I really wanted to understand that because I wanted to know how to fix that. And of course, spoiler, I became a counselor. So then I got to like dive in and swim in it and understand it more deeply. And I think so much of that for me and my journey, just as a spiritual worker, as someone who was like basically sent here to help the planet, I needed to understand the rules that exist here with my autistic brain that doesn't operate like literally anyone's. I needed to understand how on earth the rules are here because it's so not intuitive and it's all backwards and wonky and it's upside down and inside out and we're in Wonderland and how do we get out of here and how do I help people get out of here? How do I get out of here? How do we not out of here as in like actually, but vibrationally, how do I get out of like feeling tortured every day? And so it was partially about me wanting to serve others, but it started with me trying to figure out what was wrong with me. As like every therapist I think can attest, that's one thing that like draws them to the field. But but in part, like before I was a counselor, like as a teenager, as a young adult, people that were hurting were always drawn to me to talk to me about their hurting because I was always a good listener and I was always an encourager. And because of those things, those people gravitated to kind of get before like I was like educated or had the ethics or whatever, I was always just like witnessing. I was basically witnessing what people had to share and validating their experience and offering support, sometimes like outside of balance, to be clear. I like at 19, I was like walking through cemeteries in the middle of the night to find my friend who left me like a suicide note at a coffee shop. Like I wasn't always balanced. So it's no surprise that I ended up a therapist, obviously, but so that was like my resounding call or mission was mental health. But if you break that down further from the lens of present day, it was really like service to humanity. It was service to humanity and relieve the suffering of humans in this like matrix that is littered with trauma. And so that's how it showed up in the matrix was to become a therapist, right? And so my second, I would say my second calling from that would be motherhood. I always wanted to be a mom. I always did, which is so funny because I had held a baby like maybe two or three times before I had one. So it's not like I was surrounded with children. Like there are some people who are surrounded with children, so it's just natural that they would have them. Like I'm in Idaho, so there's lots of Mormon families and people who grow up in Mormon families. They've got like five, six siblings. So they're like they've got a baby on their hip by the time they're seven of a sibling, like kind of parenting a sibling in some ways or mentoring them. And I just didn't have that. I was the youngest. I didn't have any friends that had younger siblings. They were all only children. And I didn't know what to do with them. Like if I saw them in public or whatever and they're like drooling or melting down or whatever, I'm just like, what do I do with that? And so you'd think I wouldn't want one, but I always knew, like from the age of, I remember the first time my daughter came to me on the ethereal, I was having a series of dreams when I was in eighth grade. Eighth grade. So I'm like, in the middle of a mass eating disorder and like on a heart monitor and I'm having dreams. I'm listening to New Kids on the Block and I'm dreaming about this toddler girl that looks just like my daughter. But she had like super dark hair and I was like blonde. And I'm just like, how am I gonna have this kid with the dark hair and what's happening? But she looked exactly like my daughter looked at the age of like 18 months, 2 years old, this vision of this child that I kept getting for years, but it started when I was in the eighth grade. And so I knew I was called to be a mom. And even at times where like, you know, I've counseled all these teenagers that are suicidal and they cut and there are all these things. And for every moment where I had like a pivotal mental health episode in my young adult teenage life where like the thought of suicide could emerge, it was never an option because I wanted to be a mom. That was always the thing that stopped me from cutting or entertaining the idea of suicide, even at my most desperately depressed. It was never an option because I was going to be a mom. And so enter Charlotte when I'm 28. And she's almost 20. She'll be 20 in a month. My daughter is almost, I'm so proud of her. She's about to be in a musical that opens this weekend at her college, and she's on stage the entire musical because she sings in a lisp. I'm so excited. I'm so proud that I have this amazing daughter. Um, yeah, it's a huge blessing. So motherhood, while being literally the hardest thing I've ever done in my entire life, to be clear, not parenting her, co-parenting for me has been an awful initiation, as like I think many parents with split custody before a child's an adult can attest to how viscerally difficult it is to have to share a child. And I don't like to talk about those experiences because they are actually really awful and I don't want to. So I just to every mother that has to share her child for any reason, I see you. I see you. It's awful. But she's mine. She's all mine. She's herself. She's her own. She doesn't belong to me or anyone. She is a free sovereign being, but I don't have to share my enjoyment with her with anybody else except for the world now, which I celebrate. Okay, so I would say my third calling in the before times was to be a writer. And I wanted to like lump writing and creation together. Like I do art and all this other stuff, but I would say like, nah, I'm gonna go just writer because I've been writing since I could write. Since I was given language to put on paper, I was writing. Since I had consciousness to understand what a writer was, I was modeling myself after Jo from Little Women, after Laura Ingalls from Little House on the Prairie, and after Anne Shirley from Anne of Green Gables, all of whom were really feisty writers. I embody that archetype perfectly. And what's so beautiful and horrible about that is that it's a way of communicating. It's a way I feel like the way I write is a way for people to feel seen and heard and understood through my storytelling, which is often through the lens of memoir. That's what I do. But in that, what is so beautiful, I think, and vital about it is offering insight and perspective because language is so powerful that it really paints a kind of a healing portal to it. So I that's how it is now. But as it was before, when I was first discovering my voice as a writer, I would be like really derivative of others that I found to be relatable. So like I would often try to write in terms that were reflective of like musicians, honestly. I love musicians because their prose were always so like dramatic and meaningful, and I loved The Cure, so I'd be like the blackened abyss with everything in my like first writing journal, which I think is actually I have it right down here. I have all of my journals like right down here in this desk from like ninth grade, I think is my first like dramatic poetry writing journal. But beyond that, it was so interesting because our entire lives is spent knowing something about ourselves and then forgetting it and then remembering it again is what it feels like. So we know who we are and then we go into this amnesia, and that contrast when we discover who we are again is so beautiful because I in college I was writing. I like I did take creative writing and poetry and all these things, but I because I was going into psychology, there was this really strong messaging that you had to take creativity and opinion and perspective out of everything and just make it about instead analysis and things that you could prove that someone else has proven. And so I ended up needing to master academic writing, which is so specific with APA format and what wording you can use and how you cite things. And it actually stripped away every creative lens that I had in order to master writing in a way that pleased my professors, that got me into grad school. And because that was just like pounded into me, it was like I forgot how to be creative. And it was like a death. And so it took until I was probably 10 years into my career, 8 to 10 years into my career, where I started like igniting this little bug of like, wait, writing isn't just for writing notes on patients and the visits you had with them. It's like something that you do to express and purge and create and reflect and process of your own making. And that's when I started writing my book. That's when I started like going back into poetry. I was doing screenwriting for a while and before COVID was getting some bites on this whole series that I had created and written and spent numerous hours in doing so. It was absolutely beautiful. And so I would say that the sweetest part of that was to rediscover what I had lost. And now that I'm in a stage of my life where I am given an opportunity to really reflect on these missions, these old missions, they reinvent with time. So they're like an umbrella that I can pick and choose from how that looks. And so I'm putting a different frequency on those things. So as far as like mental health being my interest, it's really service to humanity. As far as like motherhood, that's really me also going into this crone era, which is really not just about herbalism, but it's about wisdom and mentorship and having learned many lessons and integrating them and being able to guide and teach others. So now it doesn't look like me at Target trying to keep Charlotte from having a meltdown by giving her popcorn. Instead, it looks like me teaching and guiding and encouraging people who are about to embark on motherhood or going through motherhood challenges or just learning in general of things that I have greater mastery on than maybe they do. And because we're in different stages. And so that's how that looks now. And obviously, as far as writing is concerned, and I'll bring that in a second, is the requirement that I am publishing my book this year that I was called to write this book, called, literally called. I know exactly when and where I was in 1999. I was called to write this book. I wrote the book. I was called again when I turned 40 to bring it forth. I wrote it, and now I'm 48, and it was on pause until Spirit said it was time, and now this is the time. So, um, literally very few things to be done before it. So few things to be done before that comes forth. And so that's how the writing is coming forth, as well as some other projects that are going to take place along with that. But that's the before times translated into the present times. But those, as you can see, are thematic and they can also change. So for you, as you're looking back at your life, you may have had a theme of like you really enjoy baking or something. And you're like, how does that even like translate to a spiritual calling? Well, these are skills that don't exist for most people. They don't have time or space or energy to know how to bake things. So maybe um, there is an initiation with alchemy in that baking for you to understand how these ingredients put together become something else and how that translates into our own development and change. And also applying that in a teaching modality to help people learn more about themselves and their own change or how to be more self-sustainable. That can look like that this in this era. And maybe that's just arbitrary, but um, it can shift and change along with where you're at in your life. And so with that, I'm going to bring it into like what my present missions have been in the after times of like post awakening. What has that looked like for me, bringing in and recognizing the missions that I was called into since Kundalini. So I came up with five of them. And so my Kundalini happened December 2021. And so immediately upon that, like there was a shedding of myself, of everything that wasn't me had to clear, right? And so then I was a blank canvas with which to be painted upon. And those things immediately turned into um the following. So in the awakening journey, my first go-to was, as I've talked about many times, the laws of the universe or the Hermetic principles, the Emerald tablets, the Corpus Hermeticum, and the Kabbalion. They all embody these seven laws. And when that came to me, I was just like, oh my gosh, there's order everywhere, and people don't even see it. I need to tell everybody there's order everywhere. So so I began developing and piloting locally a process of teaching people about Hermetic principles and then translating that to like an online course of the Hermetic principles. And so much of my ability to like promote and communicate those things on a larger scale, um, is through a computer instead of in person. And it wasn't sustainable to do it in person simply because like the rent of the space to do it, it was not an equitable exchange for what was financially viable. And so it really needs to be communicated like this instead, but it's been piloted. I've gotten feedback. It's really robust and beautiful, and it needs to be communicated with the world. And so it's a matter of being able to promote it and package it in a way that's accessible to people, that feels relevant to people. And so teaching and mentoring of these concepts so people don't feel lost in chaos, but they can see the order in things is a huge mission for me. Number two was after that mission began. So as that mission was going, I was called to create community. And so that's on a microcosm. Uh, how it started was in my local area. I have many friends over the you live here this long, you like make friends, you lose friends, but in that evolution of myself, I have found some incredible soul family. And so I started really hosting gatherings called the Lightworker Web. And I started that it was right about the month that I went to Shasta for the first time, which was a year ago in August. Um, and I would have these gatherings, sometimes weekly, sometimes monthly. We'd meet out in our community and like go on hikes and do things like that, have movie nights, inner child nights, things like that, and really trying to connect people to other people that are of like mind, start their own creations individually. And that got somewhat interrupted with a larger scale community that I became part of online that spanned the world, throughout the world. Not like it was worldwide, but like I was part of and helped lead a community um, that was all over the world. And so in that experience, I was able to connect the microcosm to the macrocosm and make connections that were super vital in my own development and for my service of mankind and in grid work and in all of these things. Like I have lifelong friends from this experience that has changed me forever. So that was my next calling. And I'm of course really thrilled to see where that's going to continue to go because they don't always like have a solid end, you know? So there are like the umbrellas that are created and then they look like different things underneath those umbrellas. Of course, there's my book that I'm supposed to launch this year. That's part of it. And then my herbalism call was loud. And that happened in as soon as I got back from my last Shasta, or not my last, but my second to last Shasta trip last August. I got back and boom, herbalism initiation. It was right after the mycelium had connected to me in the redwoods, and I had done my healing with the Nephilim and Sasquatch, and then I was just like, boom, plants. Um, Herbs were coming to me in my sleep, and through that herbalism initiation, which I've posted a lot on recently on social media, of like bringing my apothecary together, I'm not only like working with the herbs as a healing modality but incorporating it into everything that I do, topically and internally. So skincare for myself and my close friends, tinctures medicinally, dry herbs to use in teas, expanding that into also Chinese medicine, growing the herbs, having close friends who farm those herbs, utilizing local resources to use local herbs and make things from them. And as part of that herbalism journey is also um, that process of like fermentation, which is not just baking sourdough, you guys. It's not just creating a ginger bug to make your own sodas. It's not just creating sauerkraut. It's understanding that things take time to extract and become their their peak self. It takes time. We want things so instantly right now that we even like can fast forward things on TikTok so people talk faster because we need more dopamine. And the fermentation initiation allows us to understand things will take time. It will always take time. And we must, for the most beautiful things to be born in our life, it takes time. And so in this herbalism, journey is not just about like healing the body and coming back to the earth and coming back to the cycles and using all natural things for my body internally and externally, but it's also about understanding how you get medicine from things, how you learn from things, how you integrate things. All is timed perfectly until it's ready. Until it's ready, because you won't get anything out of a tincture that hasn't sat for 6 weeks and you've shaken it and you've tended to it and you've put it in the right environment with the right things. It won't be medicine. It will be useless. So if we don't give the same amount of time and effort and attention to things as we're wanting to make them come into the world, we're also not going to get the medicine we're looking for. We're not going to get the medicinal qualities or the antioxidants or all of the nutritive properties that we are wanting to benefit from. We're going to get garbage. So you have to like care and tend to what you're creating. And this is a mirror of whatever you're creating, whatever you're bringing forth into the world. And so herbalism to me has been a modality to teach me those lessons of like, be still, wait, allow. You can't rush. You can't rush grief. You can't rush through things. You have to just let them be until you're ready to move to the next thing. That is really hard for me as an active, proactive creator to pause and just be. And and when it's hard, you're in the right place. Because when it's hard, that's room for growth. When there's emotion that comes up, that means more needs to be brought through. So I don't block it. I don't apologize for it. I feel it and I release it. And that's when we know we're on the right track, is when I've hit something that feels uncomfortable. This is an opportunity to dig deeper and to see what I need to learn. And for my herbalism has been such a mirror of the grief initiation and releasing because I have no control. I have no control over how fast I feel better or I feel alive. It has to go at its own time, and so do tinctures and extractions and my sauerkraut. It it's weighted and it's breathing, but it overflowed overnight, and I've got like purple sauerkraut juice all over my counter because I have to watch it closely. I could be flooded with it if I'm not finding the right balance. And so all of these are mirrors for us to learn from. And they're beautiful. And so, of course, the one I'm going to be talking about today of the missions is Gridwork. Gridwork is the mission, this particular mission of Gridwork, which is the umbrella, my mission within that, which I was called to do, of healing the masculine, healing the divine masculine, I was called to do so beautifully and so timely for my trip, my first trip to Maui, which was for my daughter's graduation trip in 2023 in June. It was for it was for summer solstice. My first day waking up in Maui was to see the sunrise on the beach in Maui for solstice. It was crazy, and that's when I got my gold pearl that day. Um, so it was a huge initiation for me in general, but it was an entry point into my grid work journey to heal the masculine. And how did I know it was to heal the masculine? That was something that came through just over and over to me that and again, this is like before I was connected to community. I was completely like, I was teaching, I was talking to people about what I was learning, but I had not met anybody that was where I was at. So I felt still really isolated in my journey. The only person I could really like relate to was on a public like platform like Mateus Stefano through initiation on Gaia, and he has his own like huge mission that is incredible. And he had talked about grid work in passing, and he had been doing these amazing missions that came with teachers that would kind of guide that. And he was working with Valhalla and he was doing, I remember it was around this time that he was doing this big mission around all the Norse gods and Sveltbar, is that what it's called? It's like an island. I'm probably saying it wrong, but he was doing this huge like these crystal spheres that were etched. Were they with Merkabas maybe? There was a there was a geometry on them that were being dropped all around the island that I just said probably poorly. And he was bringing in a bridge to Asgard, to the gods, the Rainbow Bridge. It was a whole thing, and what he was bringing through was very like activating for me. And then I just was not interested in doing any of that work at that point because I was just like trying to live my life, get footing, understand what is happening to me. And then I get this very aggressive call. Charlotte needs to go to this trip. Um, but it's for you too. For Maui and my best friend living there, I was like, that sounds great. And Charlotte and I had talked about graduation trips and stuff, and we had really not traveled together outside of going to see Hamilton in Seattle when she was like in, I don't know, eighth grade. So we hadn't traveled together to a destination. We talked about maybe going to Thailand or something. We had passports, but we've never used them. And it just came up like financially and otherwise, that seemed like the best thing to do to be like far, but still close enough because my parents were still like hit and miss, honestly. You didn't know if they were gonna die when you were gone. It was just like, so we thought that was a safe bet. And as soon as I decided that, I was doing a course on womb healing, healing the divine feminine, actually, with a group of women, and that was so powerful. And I, of course, am going to Maui, so I'm thinking Lemuria, the womb, and all this stuff. But I get there, and so what you think is not always what it's going to be. So we get there. I have a full body shutdown with intensity of the masculine indigenous wound, just like smacked me in the face. Roosters, because there's chickens, wild chickens everywhere on Maui. Roosters are like actively attacking me. When I'm just walking down the beach, they're like coming up on me. Like 20 of them are swarming around me. I'm like, what's happening? It was just like very clearly, oh no, you are not here for the feminine is doing great. Like we're in a world that's not yet supportive and reflective of our stance right now, but the feminine is doing great. The masculine is not doing great. They are hurting. And it was so much around, and I'm not political. So I'm going to use words that sound political, but I don't mean it in a political way as like, rawr, I don't mean it like that. But colonialism has done a number on absolutely everything, and that's had everything to do with Gaia's pillaging. It's had everything to do with the loss of indigenous cultures, and those sacred connections to the land and cycles and the divine leadership of both balance of the masculine and feminine, and that is reflected in the land. The land was what I was there to grid work from the wound of the masculine that had been completely like crushed by colonialism. And colonialism itself is an extension of, I would say, darkness. Just just darkness. Like even in the Bible, like the Romans, it's the Romans that created an oppressive upside down belief system that separates you from God yourself not being accessible to God, that you have to go through someone else and pay someone to be forgiven or to be a worthy being and not just like born of sin and should grovel because you exist. Like, no. And so, like that messaging of colonialism and missionary work and all that stuff completely destroyed the indigenous, therefore taking the power away, not only from women and burning them at the stake as witches everywhere, but then also destroying the masculine's sovereignty to have to then toil and pay to exist and not being able to protect their families, their wives, their daughters, their sisters, their children, and being just their backs breaking in their toiling. And that's been reflected in a million different ways. I mean, in my own family, I have a whole lineage of basically like moonshiners from Appalachia and like people who had to work in mines. And my grandpa died at 55 from mercury mining and lumber and all of his poor lungs, which is really a reflection of the throat chakra being shut down because he was just beaten down. And that has been reflected in all divine masculines since that influx of mass colonialism, which is a result of the fall of humankind during the age of Leo and Atlantis and Lemuria. So it wasn't a small thing, and this all comes flooding in as I go to Maui, and I'm like, oh God, that's like a big thing to do. But I thought it was just going to be a gridwork trip. I thought it was going to be, I'm going on a gridwork trip. That's my grid work. I'm done with said grid. No, no, that was nay. That was just the beginning. But I want to share with you something really pointed about this is that you know you're called when you're uncomfortable. Like I've said, you know that when you hit something that is a block, it needs cleared. I knew travel was not something I'd done. And I want to share with you, prior to my Kundalini awakening, my autism was much more crippling than it is to me now. It still exists. I wouldn't call it crippling. I'd call it just like I'm just a nuanced human being with special needs. That when those needs are not met, everybody knows, including my body, my psyche, everyone around me understands Audrey is not doing well because I have sensory things, I have a certain flow that exists for me, and it's not a matter of like being difficult. This is how I'm freaking wired and have been since birth. And so just knowing there's a name for it makes me know I'm not just an asshole. I am not just like someone who's like selfish or narcissistic. People have called me these things or cold. People have called me those things my whole life. Anyone who knows me closely knows I'm just heart and I am completely heart-centered. And anything that not is not heart-centered, I want to go away. But sometimes my face doesn't reflect that or my tone doesn't reflect that. And sometimes I'm very blunt and sometimes I shut down physically and I get overstimulated and my body hurts or, I'm just a unique and special individual. But because of all of those things is why I wanted to tell you I didn't go outside much for most of my adult life unless it was very, very specific circumstances. I refused to camp. I refused to go to the mountains except for like a day trip. If there were mosquitoes or wind or weather or too much dirt or sand, I would go into the car. I could not be in a tent. Well, you'll see that I am wearing different clothing now, and that's because The technical difficulties that have existed for this recording is beyond any technical difficulties that I've experienced thus far. In terms of when I was recording yesterday, I was interrupted by my cat, by lawn guys. My mic stopped working, and then I paused it, and then I couldn't find the previous recording anywhere. It was gone. I did end up finding it. It took me a very long time, but that is why this is an interrupted podcast. So, that's why I'm wearing new clothes, because it's the next day. So I'm going to try to wrap this up as quickly as I can without incident. Thank you for your patience. So, as I was discussing yesterday, part of the grid work journey being so potent in its call, in its mission, is because as I mentioned with my autism, outdoors was not a place that I wanted to be ever. Of course, after my awakening and I started recognizing like geometry and everything and consciousness and everything, of course, then I was and my hypersensitivity to sensory things actually shifted from nature to matrix stuff. So I became hypersensitive to artificial frequencies and big crowds and things like that, and craved more to be in nature. So it did seem a natural progression, but I have to say, because I never wanted to go outside, my dad was an outdoorsman and always wanted us to like go camping, or we have property in the mountains and never went. He went by himself. None of us wanted to go. And so I go now, by the way. But I no experience with the outdoors, like at all. Aside from like maybe walking on the greenbelt by the river or in the foothills for like a half an hour with my dog when I was younger. Like no experience outdoors. And I went from that to being called to places on the land by myself. And to be clear, I also had not traveled in a plane since 9/11 except for twice, which is embarrassing to say, but I just really had no desire, and everything was overwhelming, and like autistic people really like control, and so travel is like free for all, and so I just didn't want to do it. And then accessibility and career and childcare and all those things. So it was just like I was asked to go on land, which I had no experience with, and also travel alone, which I didn't even travel. And so I didn't know how to do that. I didn't know how to like book flights. I didn't know how to like properly pack. I didn't know what TSA was going to do to me. I didn't know any of that stuff. So we're literally talking blank slate. Get the call, here, go, travel to places. Hadn't gone on road trips. I know my mom had always given me like messaging when I was younger, when I'd go like on a road trip with like, I think my roommate when I was 18. We went to Portland from Boise, Idaho. And she's like, be careful, there are axe murderers that will try to rape you and things like that. Like fear was really instilled in like being a female and traveling at all, but like traveling alone. It was, and even though she has dementia, and I would tell her, like, I'm going on a trip. Who are you going with? Myself. And she's like, do you have a knife? And I'm like, yeah, I have a knife. I'm gonna use it for grid work, but she doesn't know what that is, so I never said. And she's like, but do you have two knives? She's so cute. So I am asked to go on the land. I'm asked to go on planes. I'm asked to go driving by myself. To boot, I have no sense of direction, which anyone in my life can attest to this. So really, it was a miracle when GPS came online, because I was like, yay, I'm not going to get lost anymore. Funny story. When you're on the land, you're often out of cell service. And so the GPS does no good for me at that point. And so, yes, I have been lost, and in like really big, wide places in the wilderness where I'm like, I'm gonna definitely die. And miracles happen. Like, I'm just saying, Miracles happen. There's no reason I should have been as successful as I have been at grid working. And even telling some of these stories, like my daughter gets really mad at me, or I have friends who are like, "How are you alive?" Because they knew me as the person who wouldn't even go camping. And now I'm like climbing Black Butte next to rattlesnakes by myself on lava rocks with no path. And so that, but I go where I'm called and I trust that I'll be okay. And so far, I've been okay. There were a couple of times where I was legit terrified, which I'll speak to in a second. First of all, I want to say how you know you're on the right path and that you're being held. And I'm not making this up because that's not even something I could make up because it wasn't even in my scope of imagination. Kind of like when I have guides come to me and I've never heard their names before. There was a night in my early awakening where I was awakened by Saint Thomas Aquinas, and I had no idea that was an actual person or a saint. Turns out it is. Turns out he studied esoterica and before he died was seen, witnessed levitating. I have a book of his on my bookshelf back here. But you can't make it up, right? So on my path of grid work to help heal the divine masculine, which ended up largely being on land that is in the Pacific Northwest. Of course, Maui. I did travel like to Chicago and Austin, Texas, and like Salt Lake and area, and I've gone to Sedona in Arizona. I've gone to like a little bit over here, but it was mostly like up here. Like the furthest south I went was San Diego. So I went all the way down California, uh close to the Mexican, 20 minutes from the Mexican border. So I hit the whole West Coast pretty much and then a little bit in the middle, but all of those places had indigenous populations with the masculine having a wound. And so and I didn't realize that I was going to be like healing the masculine of the Nephilim and the Sasquatch as well. Like that was incredible. So there was a lot that went into that, but how you know, how you like, I feel like I'm doing this thing that's like completely insane to anybody. Like I'm traveling, I'm climbing, I'm going into trees, I'm climbing, I climbed trees, I'm going into caves, I'm doing grid work in these places. I'm carrying a backpack with like crystals and actual like wooden grids with geometry on that and bringing like rocks and feathers and bark and like think like I'm in a video game of Zelda exchanging things with ancient spirits and like it's really I'm really doing this stuff. So how do I know I'm doing the right thing? Oh my gosh, the magic that happened on some of these trips. For example, I'm going to give you just a couple because I know that this is getting long and I want to be able to channel for you as well. So, the examples I'm going to give of the magic, um, number one was when I went to Pluto's Cave. Pluto's Cave is in Mount Shasta. It's outside of Mount Shasta in this area that's just like juniper trees. Friendly reminder, I have a juniper on my tattooed on my arm because of a whole thing from my childhood. But I knew I was going to have to go into Pluto's cave, and I was told what to bring there. And I was bringing like soil from the birds of prey in Boise to plant in Pluto's cave with these specific things with my grid. And it was my first solo trip on land was to go to Mount Shasta in the spring, or not spring, the fall of 2023. I went by myself. I told people it was like my first trip after my daughter graduated and went away to college. It was my solo single mom trip, my celebration. I made it. She's alive trip kind of thing. But really, it was that, but it was also a grid work trip because the mountain calls and you must answer. So I went and I did tons of cool stuff on the mountain, but I was supposed to go to the cave. And I'm like, I feel like that's uncomfortable and dark and dangerous. I have always had a fear of the dark since yay big. I have had a nightlight. I even pack nightlights with me. And so I know I'm going to a cave when I'm planning on going to this place because I'm supposed to grid in the stinking cave. So I'm getting like a headlamp, extra flashlights, extra batteries for the flashlights so that I know that I won't run out of light. If I go in, I'm thinking I'm just gonna go in a little bit into the cave so I can still see light and I'll probably grid like behind a boulder or something if there's no people watching and it's gonna be very low key. But what I don't know is that that's not what Spirit had intended for me at all. But I'm by myself. So, crazy story. The GPS works all the way to get to the cave ish. Like there's some signs that are made. They're like this way. So I pull up to where the cave near where the cave entrance is. It's like a parking area where people park to go to the cave, but I didn't even know which direction the cave would be from this random like little road that's next to lots of trailers and sketchy looking people that definitely like rock in corners and talk to themselves. So I'm like, I feel afraid. Pull up to this. I'm the only one there. I'm the only car there. It's like 10 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday or something, and my GPS won't work, so I don't even know which way to get to the cave. I've got my backpack, I've got my water. And as I get out of the car to lean into it to get my backpack and my water, and I think I had my walking stick, I hear a voice from behind me. I turn around, and it's this like older hippie dude with a younger person my age. Like he was in his 70s and she was in her 40s, and she's got like blue hair or something. And she's got tattoos, and he's got a walking stick, and he looks like he's definitely smoked pot since the 70s. And he's got a staff too. And he's like, hey, are you going to the cave? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, do you want to go with us? And I'm like, this is how horror movies start, but sure, you know? And apparently they had just met at coffee the day before and they were at some kind of like meditation group thing together. So they were just new buddies. And then I'm like with these two strangers who are basically strangers to each other, and we decided to trek into this cave together. And Pluto's cave, it's very unassuming. Like you wouldn't think it is what it is. It's because you walk up this little trail with little like juniper bushes and sage and stuff, and then suddenly there's like this area where you can walk down and an entrance that ends up being like this huge vaginal cave entrance with like I would say that there's like two littler caves with light that comes in between, and then there's a cave that goes and goes and goes and goes. And I have gone to the end of that cave at a different trip with friends. But so the female, she was like nervous and she was hypoglycemic and she didn't pack the right things for it. And she started having a panic attack. She ended up stopping her journey with us about in the second cave. But this guy, I forget his name, but what he did for a living was really interesting. I think he was from California and he was an artist and he hand painted wallpaper for rich people. And he did that for like 5 months out of the year, and the rest of the year he traveled off of what he made from his art designs. And he had a daughter my age, and he was just like super chill, funny. What was cool was I've never been in a cave before, but he was also an expert in body manipulation. So as he's guiding me into the cave, he's like, and make sure and place your foot here and your weight a little to the left so that this doesn't collapse because you can tell that it's kind of a weak connection here or something. He was like, God gave me, I have no evidence this man wasn't an angel. I have no evidence. Because he guided me deep into this cave where he just wants to meditate. in the cave because it's on a vortex and it's very high vibrational. And could he have been a serial killer? Maybe, but the timing was just perfect and it was amazing. He was good vibes. It was great. So we end up going probably about a mile into the cave with like headlamps and our I had a lantern and a flashlight and a headlamp. I was like really prepared and everything's dusty because nothing actually rains inside a cave. So it's just obviously, so there's no, it's just dust everywhere. So I got like covered in this grimy dust, smells very bad. And you can smell bat pee a little bit. It's subtle nuance of bat pee. But we get on this big boulder and he's like, Audrey, only if you're comfortable, but what are your thoughts? Would you be interested in doing some Wim Hof breathing with me and then turning off the lights and seeing what we experience in the darkness of the cave? And he did sound like that. He was kind of like he could have been a surfer dude, hippie guy, like in the 70s, and he had like longer hair with his staff. And he was like on one boulder, and I was on a whole different boulder. And we're like talking to each other from about 20 feet away. And I'm, afraid of the dark, but it feels like this is a time to face a fear. It's like an initiation. So I'm like, yeah, yeah, I'll do it. I'll do that. And he's like, only if you're comfortable though. Like, I don't want you to feel scared. And I'm like, I feel safe. And he's like, cool. Well, let's start with the breathing. And so he's like led groups on Wim Hof breathing before. So he leads me through this breathing exercise. And then we turn off the lights and it's just black. Everywhere is black. There's no minimal light from a distance, like what we experience in our lives in a dark bedroom or whatever. That's not dark. Even on in the mountains at night, if you're camping, there's still like the moon and the stars. We don't even know what dark is until you go into a cave and turn out the lights when you're a mile in. And we did that. And I had my eyes closed and I was meditating for a while. I'd already done my grid work. So this was just an experience. And I have my eyes closed. And then after a little while, I'm like, why do I have my eyes closed? It's black. I'm going to open my eyes into the blackness, which is really an incredible experience in your perspective of fear and being alone and looking into the black unknown. Holy shit. And so I had been, seeing swirling purple lights in my head because I do see lights and colors in my third eye. And then I opened my eyes and I saw the exact same thing with my open eyes. So outside of me, I was seeing purple swirling, fully sober. And I was just in awe of this visual experience that I was having deep in a cave that I would have not had because I traveled there by myself. And Spirit provided me with not only companions at the very moment I needed them, companions where one is an actual, like, trained person in body manipulation while in a cave or climbing mountains to be able to teach me how to get deep enough into a cave where he then led me through a breathing technique in order to have this experience where I face my fear of the dark. That you can't make up. You just can't make it up. And so it's a remarkable hero's journey that I've been through. And of course, like we make it out of the cave fine and we exchange like info and we exchange like photos later that day. And then we haven't talked again, but it was just so like beautiful and perfect. My other experience of you can't make it up, and I have so many, so I just picked two. The one where I got lost. Um, I had dropped my daughter off at the University of Utah. She goes to a different college now in Idaho, but I dropped her off in Utah and I was driving home from that trip to drop her off. and I was driving back to Idaho, and there was one of my patients at the time had said, you need to stop at the City of Rocks if you're going back from Salt Lake. You need to check it out. And because you love rocks, and I love rocks. So I'm like, yeah, that sounds great. Hell yeah, I'm gonna do it. So, and I had already done some adventuring, not a lot, but I was like, okay, it's just gonna be a hike. I go to national parks all the time. It's fine. So I go to this national park, I park. There's no one there because it's like fall. And so maybe I had already dropped her off at college and I was just visiting. I think I was just visiting. So I park, I've got my backpack, I take a picture of the map at the entryway and the path I was on. I took a picture so I'd know the name of the path. Everything was labeled. I had kind of like gotten down how to like navigate these things. Again, there was no people around. I don't know why people weren't choosing to be outdoorsy because it was lovely weather. So I'm loving the rocks. I'm completely into them. They're recognizable. They look like they have personalities. I'm seeing landmarks everywhere. I'm taking pictures of the landmarks. I'm like taking really good track of where I'm at because even though things are recognizable, I also don't trust my sense of direction. And so I'm being really careful. And I end up doing this incredible grid work on top of like a big, big, big boulder I had to like scale. I have this amazing lesson from an indigenous spirit who's talking to me about using the currents of the air to fly instead of working hard to fly, like using the currents. And and then when I was done with that, I was like, I always pack like bread and cheese and apple and chocolates in my bag when I'm grid working because those all are very good when you're grid working and you can travel with them. So I have a little snack. I look at my watch and I'm like, oh, the sun's gonna set in a couple hours. I better head back to the car. Okay. So I recognized where I was at. I climbed down, and then there were some certain places I could go left or right that were not overtly where I could see big landmarks. They were more in kind of a valley area. But if you've been to national parks, there are like big points that have like signs pointing this trail this way, this trail this way. And it was like in Alice in Wonderland when she has that sign and everything is every direction. And it had actually been knocked down. The sign had been knocked down, and it was like I would use the word cattywampus. So the sign of which trail goes to which direction was jiggered. So I couldn't tell, did it fall this way? Did it fall that way? Did it fall sideways? Like I couldn't tell which is the way. So I like panicked and I picked one, and I want you to know it was the wrong one because I ended up hiking for about an hour and a half to a place where I did not fully didn't recognize. And like, oh shit, it's been an hour and a half. If I go an hour and a half back, it'll be dark and I will be lost in a national park by myself at night in a desert. That sounds fantastic. There's no cell service. I can't get onto the GPS. There's not a single human being in this entire city of rocks, which is, I don't know how many miles wide of rocks, rock formations, beautiful area, but I completely go into panic mode. I completely go into like, oh shit, I'm gonna die out here. There's definitely snakes. I am sorry, Charlotte. I left you alone in college to then die in a desert. So I panicked. I started looking at whatever sign I could find. They're talking about campgrounds. I'm like, okay, cool. If I go to a campground, there's bound to be something at a campground that gives me a location, or maybe there's like a tower or something. So I end up, I think now at this point, I'm on the whole other end of where I had parked of the entire national park. And I find a campground that's number 44, which is my number. And I'm like, well, this is a good sign. And I look to my left and there's like a bathroom. And I'm like, great, because I really need one right now. So I use the bathroom. I can't get anything on my cell phone. I've seen no human beings. And I walk out of the bathroom about to break down crying when I see someone had a huge truck. They had just parked there. They had gone in to use the men's bathroom, I think. Their door was wide open. Their engine was running. It was a big pumped up truck. I look at my phone. I have bars. This truck had internet. And I immediately get on it. I'm trying to find directions. I get the directions going, and the guy gets in the car, drives away, and I have directions to get to my car. I walk 45 minutes to get to my car. I survived. That is God stuff right there. So I ended up being called into work where I have no sense of direction. I've never traveled, autistic, never camped, and I'm ending up spelunking in caves and getting lost in a city of rocks. I have so many other stories because of the things I've done, but I wanted to say in my experiences of this grid work, beginning, getting called to do it, and then completing it with my last trip in Maui, where I knew I was done because I was told very specifically not to collect anything with all the grid work I was doing, specifically like I was called there to do healing for Lahaina and specifically for Io Valley and Hana with the indigenous masculines to bring back codes from all the places I'd gone where I had done the healings. And I was so fully supported and loved and told throughout the journey, don't collect anything, you're done. Don't collect anything, you're done. Because usually I take things from one place to another place to another place, like rocks and sand and stuff. And I was just told, no, 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 you're done. It's done. It's complete. And then when I return home from my Maui trip, I have a dream, and there's like these indigenous women that came to me, elder women. And this is one of those dreams. And the elder women, this very old woman, she looks me in the eye, and she's wrinkled and beautiful. And she shows me on the ground there's hibiscus, which I've been like drinking like crazy for the past 2 months. I love it so much. But the hibiscus flowers are like Hawaii. And these hibiscus, like if you have hibiscus tea, it turns bright red within like seconds. It looks like blood, honestly. Um, and she threw out hibiscus, dried hibiscus on the ground, and the rain started to come, and the hibiscus looked like blood because it dispersed this redness everywhere. And she said, "You've been able to purify the blood that was shed on this island. Thank you. We've been waiting to do this dance, this rain dance." And then all these beautiful women, these indigenous women, started to do a dance like a hula, but it was not a hula. It was like of that vein, but it was a dance they'd been trained to do, but only to do after the purification happened. And they were doing that. And then they thanked me. And then I woke up crying. So that was amazing and beautiful. And so I know the mission's complete, but then I cried a lot because I'm like, my mission's complete. But I learned the mission that you have is just a puzzle piece of the entire umbrella I was talking about before. So we have the umbrellas, and then those things underneath are little pieces that put the umbrella together. Thematically, grid work is one of my callings. The mission was for the divine masculine. There will be other missions, other puzzle pieces that make up that umbrella. The biggest thing I think I would say to you is, can you identify what your umbrella is? Have you identified what specific missions in your life were? Even if it's vague, even if it's like a blurry watercolor, it's okay if you don't know the specificity of it. And in part, I've been told many times by Osho and channeling that some people are not called to a mission to be tapped to that mission until later anyway. So it's about them coming online to be ready for when their mission is communicated. And it's very clear when it happens. It's very clear when it begins and it's very clear when it ends. And so now I'm in this in-between space where I've been asked to tie up all these loose ends of projects I've been working on for years at times. And I keep being told you've got to complete those projects to get your next mission, which is very large, but you can't have your energy being drained in all of these scattered places. You completed your mission work with the actual land for this piece, but there's like your book and these other things that I have kind of on burners, but don't like drain your energy in all these different pies. Instead, complete those so we can give you the big one. And so I'm like, okay, okay. Okay, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do that, and then we're gonna see what comes next. And I want to say if you feel drawn to like conceptually what I said about grid work and that it feels like it's resonant for you and it may be of interest to you, I do have lots of videos of the work that I do, but what is it? How does it work? All that stuff. I have a whole web page dedicated to it on my website. I also have a very inexpensive like starter grid worker 101 course on there if you were interested in that. But just even reading through the web page will give you a good idea of what it is. I also have a few videos on my YouTube about grid work and just some like montages of what my grid work has looked like if you want to know more about it, because it is a really specific and beautiful call. And you can tell that you're called to grid work as a whole, as an umbrella, if you feel called to go to certain places and you don't know why, or get these opportunities. I don't know why I'm in Sedona. I don't know why I ended up in New York. Like, you wouldn't really want to go there, but you're called there and circumstances made it very easy for you to get there. I know so many people, they're like, I'm in Bali. I don't know how I got here, but I think I'm just here to do something. If that's kind of like on your radar and you want to know more about it to mindfully practice grid work, by all means, check those out. I'm going to leave those links in here. But as I wrap up, I want to do a quick channel for you because I know that this is getting quite long and uh maybe we're all tired. Okay. Osho, what do people need to know about their mission right now? It's like a deep knowing that's coven it's coded into the weaving of the very thread of your life is what a mission and a calling are for you. So the calling is the rope woven into you, and the mission is the string that's woven into the rope. One is bigger, one is smaller. They are both of the same. So if you answer your call, your quote call, you are also answering for your mission. And whenever you are in alignment vibrationally with your soul coding, you will feel in harmony. And that is when you are taking your conscious understanding of right, wrong, up, down, good, bad, all of that. You're taking that hat off, and instead you're turning on your setting of he's saying, let God take the wheel. It's like that. You're not trying to control the situation. So if someone's ego has a dream that they want to, like, I'm going to be head of finance and I'm going to make it up this ladder in this chain by the time I'm 35 and I'm going to have this income or whatever. And it's really just like drive, determination, grinding. That's very much ego driven, not to be successful, not to whatever, but this is your determination as a human being. That's your determination, your drive, your ambition to succeed, and it is not necessarily in service of humankind. When you are a person that's defined yourself as a light worker or of service to humanity, you are actually taking on a a different set of life circumstances in which you are going to not feel in harmony unless you are of service in some way to humanity, even if that looks like a macrocosmic service of a singular person. I'm seeing like a caregiver taking care of a disabled, a veteran, and that's their only contact. That's still service to humanity. It doesn't have to be what one would deem as a big mission that makes you look like a Marvel superhero. That's not what we're looking for, he's saying. He's like, it is the honoring of your coding that's been woven into you as your very self, and it is instead of working against it through narratives that are collective or individual, you are surrendering to the process and the guidance of spirit to allow you into your place, which is very much like falling into a hug of familiarity, even if it is initially uncomfortable. The discomfort only comes from resistance to the inevitable. And so when you instead allow for spirit to guide you, you fall into place with great ease. And when you're feeling that great ease, you are in your mission or uh, on the road to your mission, and that is what the ease is guiding you toward. You don't have to know the outcome, you just have to know the present moment to be in resonance or not. If you are not currently in resonance with your life path, that means your mission has not yet been revealed or the call has been given to you and you have not yet answered. Declare that you wish for that to be made clear to you and that you are of service and you are willing to answer the call when it is given and received. That will allow for an acceleration of that revealing. If you are currently in your mission, thank you. Say thank you for your service. If you are completing your mission, again, thank you. And more is to come. There's also a desire to express. There's a pivotal change of the guard that is coming up between those who have served rigorously and those that are coming in to stand up to serve that will allow for a relief of the first wave of workers to step back and integrate for a moment as others are coming up into their wave of service. And for those who have served, to understand you have an opportunity to mentor those that are coming into their stance of service, and also to be aware of your need to breathe, reflect, integrate, and appreciate your journey. It has completed and only just begun. Thank you, Osho. That's really cool. So with that in mind, please note the resources that I'm going to put on here for you. And thank you for sticking out for this whole podcast. I know it's long. And I just want to thank you for always taking part, listening. Please share with whoever this feels resonant for. If someone's like feeling lost, they don't know what comes next for them. Maybe this can be of assistance to their umbrella unraveling or mission recognition. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye.